Hey everybody, my name is Fred Van Lente. I wrote this comic, Action Activists, as part of the Civics for All curriculum with the New York City school system. We're going to be reading it for you right now with the help of my wife, Crystal Skillman. The comic was drawn by Ryan Dunlavey, and Crystal and I will take care of parts 1 and 2, and he will read parts 3 and 4. You can download the comic off the link from this website, and potentially you may have gotten it, a physical copy at school. So yeah, read along with us or just sit back and watch. We're going to be scrolling through the comic and zooming in on each panel as we read it. Crystal will be playing the squirrel.
Yes.
And I'll be playing the pigeon. So got it? Good. Okay.
All right.
Read along with us. Thanks. Action Activist Number 1 by Fred Van Lente and Ryan Dunlavey.
Part 1, How the System Works.
Look, whether you like it or not, we're all in this together. And by this, I mean the community. Even if you don't want to be a member of society,
Pew, pew, pew! Go away.
you are just by virtue of being born. Whether or not you participate in your society is up to you, but society is going to be participating on you whether you like it or not, so you should have some idea how it works.
Hey, what does that mean?
Look, no matter where you go, you keep running into rules, right?
Ugh, tell me about it.
Parents lay down rules about their household. A school has rules about what students can and can't do. The idea is so that everyone can be equally safe and happy. Or that's the idea anyway.
Aha. But who decides what's safe and what's happy?
Ah, you see, now you're getting it.
Wait, what? I am?
Yeah, in a democracy, the citizens get to be part of the discussion if they want to be.
No. Forget I said anything. I just want to be left alone.
The USA was founded, after all, by people who didn't want a faraway king making their decisions for them. They split the government power up between 3 distinct branches, all involving who gets to make and enforce and judge the laws, the rules of society.
Judicial, executive, legislative.
The USA is what's called a representative democracy because every citizen doesn't directly participate in making those rules. Instead, we hold elections to send people to represent us at various levels of government. We send some of those representatives to the legislature to discuss, and a lot of time argue,
Well, I don't agree. I totally disagree with that. I agree.
what those laws should be. After lawmakers propose and debate, they then vote on those things that should be law. To try to make the process as fair as possible, the U.S. Constitution divides the legislature into 2 chambers.
The Senate, in which every state gets 2 members.
And the House of Representatives, whose size is determined by a state's population. Representatives come from districts made up of the approximately same amount of people so that each person has the same representation. So the more populated areas can't boss around less populated areas, and vice versa. Once a law gets passed, well, you have to follow it. And it becomes the executive branch's job to make sure we do. At the national level, the president oversees a bunch of different departments to execute all sorts of different laws.
Executive, Justice, Housing and Urban Development, Agriculture, NASA.
They also arrest people who break the laws.
But what if I don't like your stupid laws?
The third judicial branch has that covered. You can sue the government in federal court and claim the law is unconstitutional. Various courts at various levels will hear your case, all the way up to the Supreme Court, which has the final say as to whether or not the law works with the rest of the Constitution. The branches each have separate roles and responsibilities, but all have to cooperate for the whole government to function properly, and each has ways of blocking the other when they disagree. Obviously, the government does all sorts of great stuff we just take for granted. They gather data for policymakers, to make decisions, they make sure our food and water is safe, they take away the garbage.
The national government in Washington has to deal with that?
No. Local issues like sanitation and education are taken care of by local government. The United States is run on a system of federalism, which is power divided into smaller units. The top one is the federal, or national government, and the New York state and city governments beneath it more or less mimic its 3-branch structure. At the executive level, At the federal level, the executive branch officer is the president. The legislative branch at the federal level is the House of Representatives and the Senate. The judicial branch at the federal level is the federal and Supreme Courts. Meanwhile, at the state level, the executive branch is represented by the governor, legislative by the state Senate and state assembly, and the judicial by state courts. At the executive or local level, the executive at the local level is known as the mayor. The legislature is the New York City Council, and the judicial branch at the local level is the criminal, civil, and civil courts. The 5 boroughs of New York City, like other local municipalities, have criminal and civil courts that are part of the state system.
Part 2. How the system doesn't work.
The bottom line, though, is the source and check over a government's power is you.
Me? What do you mean?
Even though we citizens vote for representatives to do a lot of the work of government for us, sometimes we got to take direct action ourselves.
Oh, that smacks of effort.
A lot of people know that in 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court handed down one of its most important rulings ever, Brown v. Board of Education, which said that laws establishing racially segregated schools violated students' constitutional protections. Here we see lawyers Georgie Hayes, future Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, and James Nabrett celebrating their legal victory on the Supreme Court steps.
Segregated. Meaning
that white kids only went to schools for them, and black kids only went to schools for them. And one was a heck of a lot nicer, better funded, better facilities than the other.
That doesn't sound fair.
It wasn't, and the Supreme Court agreed, but...
Ooh, I knew there was going to be a big button there somewhere.
The court never said how schools should desegregate, only that they should do so...
with all deliberate speed.
Could you be more specific? Here in New York, the Board of Education formed a committee to generate a desegregation plan to comply with the court's ruling. After all, segregated schools were against the law in New York State even before the Brown ruling. But after 9 years, not only did nothing improve, they actually got worse. The number of segregated schools in New York City actually quadrupled between 1954 and 1964. Schools serving students of color had inferior facilities and, because of severe overcrowding, much shorter hours.
But that's awful and against the law.
Yep, but it's not like the Supreme Court can wave a magic wand and bend reality to its will. Government officials, law enforcement, and officers of the court have to work together to make sure the law is followed. On February 3rd, 1964, 460,000 students walked out of school and marched on the Board of Education building on Livingston Street. Jim Crow must go! Jim Crow must go! The boycott was the biggest civil rights protest in United States history. Some of the adults standing with the students were arrested.
In 1954, the Supreme Court said segregated schools are illegal, but New York still has them. We're not violating the laws, the city is.
But the boycotters' demands were pretty simple.
All we want is equal education. That's all. Equal education.
The boycott was organized by a pastor from Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, named Milton Gamelson.
The best kind of education for every American child is a racially balanced education where people of different ethnic groups are learning together.
The Board of Education listened to the boycotters. They agreed to a 3-year plan to desegregate the city's schools, which many whites feared involved busing kids to other neighborhoods.
Why were they afraid of busing?
Like a lot of serious problems, school segregation is a symptom of a much larger issue, mainly housing segregation. People of color, immigrants, and people with lower incomes were forced by redlining and other practices to live in segregated communities. Most kids go to school where they live. So to integrate schools, you might have to bus them outside their own neighborhoods.
Oh, I can see how some people might not like that.
Yep, as always, there are 2 sides to every problem. Once the city announced its desegregation plan, there was an immediate backlash. There were many anti-busing protests in northern cities, including New York City. In March of 1964, about 15,000 people marched on City Hall to protest integration. Parents claimed that they didn't necessarily mind having schools integrated, they just didn't want their kids to be sent to some other neighborhood.
But isn't the whole point of laws to say what you can and can't do, whether you like it or not?
That's the problem. Many people believe that the laws they support are just, and the laws they don't support are unjust. Housing segregation is still a major problem in New York City, and therefore so is school segregation. Recent studies show that New York State schools are the most segregated in the United States.
Wait. You're telling me the biggest civil rights protest in U.S. history had no immediate effect? And that's supposed to inspire me to get involved instead of just making me want to give up?
I want you to understand this isn't a made-up story where the good guys beat the bad guys, then live happily ever after. In real life, the struggle continues every day, and even if you win one battle, there will be more to come. And there's more of this comic to come. Ryan, take away part 3. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Hi, I'm Ryan Dunlavey. I'm the artist of Action Activists, which is being held up by my daughter Pearl here. And I'll be reading the part of Nia in parts 3 and 4, and reading the part of Nia's friend is my son Luke over here.
Part 3, How to be an Activist. Take the case of Nia, whose best friend had been hit by a car. He's going to have a cast on his ankle for months. It's ridiculous how fast cars fly up and down our block. Alejandro is the 3rd person to get hit just this year.
My mom's a cop. She said speed cameras really helped her in her precinct.
Speed camera? What's that?
See? They got one on the light over there. They snap photos of drivers' license plates if they run a red light or go over the speed limit. My mom says that there aren't enough police officers to go after every speeder in the city. But if you get their picture on their license plate, numbers on the cameras can send them fines through the mail. More fines can mean less speeders and less kids getting hit.
Huh. I wonder how I can get a speed camera set up in my neighborhood. To the internet! Hey, it says here that according to state law, speed cameras have to be set up near schools on school days and during school hours. My block isn't close enough to a school to qualify. That doesn't seem right. That law should be changed. One of the most important first steps to implementing change is to find out which point in the system you're trying to make a change. In this case, not the city level or the federal, but the state government, which is up the Hudson River in the New York capital of Albany. Changing the law is going to be a lot of work. Am I really up for this now? I mean, I've got tests, basketball, helping out my mom. Yeah, I am. First, Nia got her friends together. Okay, guys, we got to figure out how we're going to do this.
We need a catchy name for our group.
Way ahead of you.
I was going to go with Cool Your Jets.
And how are we going to raise awareness of the need for more speed cameras? We got a lot of options to choose from.
What about a boycott? Our teachers told us about one they did back in 1964. I don't really know. Can we really boycott the street? I don't know how that would work.
Another key element, match your strategy to your goal. Encourage brainstorming. We can get as many people as we can, kids, parents, seniors, to shut down the street. March and show the cars what can happen if we decide to take over the block. Yeah, and then we can get enough people to sign a petition to send our state senator. And we'll learn how to contact them later online. Email addresses, social media names, whatever. So we can send them updates on our progress.
My cousin works for NYPRIG. He can sign up the adults to vote, and we can show the senators in Albany will support candidates who are pro-speed cameras.
I'll write a FacePace post we can all share.
Only old people use FacePace.
Yeah, and they can vote, and we can't.
Oh, true. Solid point. Really? It's that easy?
Seriously, that all sounds easy to you?
Anything's easy if you don't plan on actually doing it.
Hardly. Take a look at what happened during Nia's block shutdown.
Jeez, kids, what's your problem?
No speed cameras. I thought that was obvious that was my problem.
Do you want to give me government cameras to make by pictures of us while we're just going around minding our own business? You trying to turn the city into some kind of police state or something?
As we saw in the school segregation example, even the most well-meaning protest can inspire an equally powerful and often well-meaning counter-protest. Do your best to educate yourself so you can respond with challenges with facts. Cameras cut down by speeding by 63% and reduce injuries by 17%. And we're not going to photograph people, only license plates. People's privacy will be protected as best we can.
You can't just trust the government with that kind of info. They're going to try to use it against us.
I trust the government more than I trust reckless drivers to not speed and hit kids. Not everyone is going to agree with you, and that's okay. It's important for you not to see them as bad, even though they may see you that way. Fair enough, Talking Pigeon. We'll just have to agree to disagree. Wah, wah, wah. We'll see which one of us wins out in the end. I'm not going to give up, ever. And so I know the winner is probably going to be me.
Whatever happened to Nina anyway?
Well, I can use my magical pigeon time powers.
You never said you had magical pigeon time powers.
You never asked.
Solid point.
Fast forward 20 years. Nia has done some stuff with her life. She went to high school, college, she's had a couple of jobs, and she finds herself back in her old neighborhood for the first time in many years.
Part 4. How to do politics.
Huh. Remember that campaign we did in 7th grade to get a speed camera put up on this block?
Yeah,
Well, it's still there.
that's good, right?
No, I mean the same camera is still there, 20 years later. Hasn't technology improved in 2 decades? Doesn't our neighborhood deserve better than this?
Maybe. Who cares?
Who
Who knows? Who cares?
I care. I always wanted to be someone who helped people. Someone you can bring problems to, and they'll be fixed. Nia learned that the city council seat in her neighborhood's district would soon be open.
I've decided to retire from public life and not seek another term.
She used the organizing skills she picked up during her activism in school and decided to run for it. To run for New York City Council, you have to be 18 years old, a U.S. citizen, and a resident of the district you're going to represent. To get your name on the ballot for the election, you have to collect 450 signatures of district residents.
Running political campaigns costs money, though, Nina.
I know that, but I've raised money for causes before, and I believe in the product I'm selling. That's me. I know I'm going to make a difference in people's lives for the better. All candidates have to register with the Campaign Finance Board and fill out many, many forms. They also must carefully file all their funding and spending with the CFB. Campaign fundraising can be a pain, but Nia quickly found she enjoyed meeting her potential constituents. Hi, I'm Nia. I'm one of your neighbors. I'm running for city council, and I thought I'd introduce myself. Whew. Over this Labor Day weekend, I think I cold called all 2,500 residents of this apartment building. But it was worth it to build support for my campaign. Nia had to debate her fellow party members in debates before the primary, which is when members of a political party choose its nominee. And then, when she won the nomination, she had to debate the other nominee from the opposing party. Fortunately, Nia was good at campaigning and getting her message out. She won the endorsements of many local newspapers and media outlets. And this added up to a victory on Election Day. Okay, wow, now the real work begins. There are 51 members of the City Council. A lot of the work of actual lawmaking, hearings about problems, cooking up legislation, happens in committees made up of smaller groups of members. The public safety equipment in our neighborhood must be as up to date as technology in the city budget allows, and our citizens deserve nothing less. Nia served on the Transportation, Land Use, Economic Development, and Consumer Affairs committees. She also had to address complaints from her fellow constituents.
A pothole in front of my driveway needs filling. Our landlord is harassing us illegally. Local power outages are having wreaking havocs on my reboots.
It's the future, so some of Nia's constituents are robots.
But they still have newspapers?
Nia found her work towards change in city government as satisfying as her activism. So what do you think?
You've given me a lot of food for thought. This whole activism thing is a lot more interesting than I gave it credit for. I don't know if I'm ready to run out in the streets right now, but I can claim to in the future. I can't do it because I didn't know anything about it.
That's true. What about you?
Who are you talking to?